Regulations are written in blood. Rules designed to keep us safe are, sadly often, put in place because somebody was seriously hurt or even died. Regulations made in this way can be a great help to others, but are always too late to save the person that needed the rule in the first place. Here's 5 tragedies that inspired life-saving reforms. I've never been to Japan, but apparently, Japan has these Rosetta Stone-looking rocks all over their coast. Written on them are varying messages, but the common theme is, remember the calamity of your ancestors. Do not build your house below this point. Japan tsunamis are no joke, and have even saved Japan from being invaded by Mongols on 2 separate occasions, with a tsunami taking out the second invasion force of 140,000 soldiers. The Mongols gave up after that. Most recently, on March 11, 2011, a magnitude 9 earthquake hit Japan's coast on Honshu. The earthquake caused subsequent tsunamis, which in turn led to the nuclear meltdown of the Fukushima power plant. Altogether, these disasters resulted in 19,300 people dead or missing. One 87-year-old Japanese man, Mr. Yamashita, was a tsunami survivor and believes that himself and others from his generation neglected to teach about the dangers of tsunamis. Without this knowledge, the younger generations instead relied on modern technology like artificial barriers to keep them safe, which the tsunamis didn't have trouble overcoming. Mr. Yamashita probably realized that many of the deceased could have been saved if they had known how to react to tsunamis, particularly to seek high ground immediately and to stay there. As the 2011 tsunami killed many people that went to check on their homes after the earthquake, not knowing that a tsunami would follow it. Quote from 69-year-old Isamu Anaeshi, "We are proud of following our ancestors, but our tsunami stones can't save us from everything." You know that shiny gray or white seal on medicine bottles? We have those because of a serial killer from the 1982 Chicago Tylenol poison pill murders. Some psycho was taking home bottles of Tylenol, putting cyanide in the pills, and putting the bottles back onto store shelves. 7 people died, and the killer was never caught. This attack was limited to Chicago, so this was most likely the work of a Chicago local, but we can't know for sure. There were suspects, most notably the Unabomber, but to this day, it's not known who the Tylenol killer was. If that wasn't bad enough, once word got around that pill bottles didn't have any form of protection and were easy targets for poison, copycat murders across the United States caused several more deaths. These attacks continued until Johnson & Johnson and other manufacturers implemented tamper-proof safety seals, so you can know for sure the bottle of pills you bought hadn't been opened by someone else. Maybe these safety seals have to be added to ice cream now. Man, there's some real psychos out there. You've probably gotten those Amber Alerts on your phone before with the description of a car. They make a really loud beeping sound. You can't miss them. Amber Alerts were named for 9-year-old Amber Hagerman from Arlington, Texas. She was riding bikes with her younger brother Ricky just a few blocks from their home in a grocery store parking lot, when she was suddenly snatched from her bike by an unknown man in a black pickup. Police found her body 4 days later with her throat slashed, naked in a drainage ditch, less than 5 miles away from where she was abducted. The community was shocked. According to spokesman for Arlington Police, Sheriff D. Anderson, quote, "It's almost like she became the child of everyone in Arlington. When the terrible day came and we found her, hope and desperation turned to anger and outrage," unquote. The idea for the Amber Alert came in a conversation with a massage therapist and her client listening to the radio, when the therapist wondered out loud if natural disaster-style alerts could be adapted to alert communities about abducted children. Amber Alerts were established 9 months later in collaboration with radio stations and police to quickly report kidnappings. Since then, communication has expanded to text messages, highway signs, pretty much everywhere they can send a message through. Amber Alerts were expanded to the federal level with the PROTECT Act, signed into law by President George W. Bush on April 30, 2003, which established the Department of Justice role for the National Amber Alert Coordinator. According to amberalert.gov, in the US, Amber Alerts have saved 988 children as of May 2020. That's in the US alone. Many other countries have adopted similar alerts. In 2016, Amber's mother, Donna Williams, said after visiting her home, quote, "It's a shame that my daughter had to be butchered and had to go through what she went through for us to have the Amber Alert, but I know she would be proud of it." The Amber case is still open to this day, with an admittingly slim but non-zero hope for Amber's family that whoever is responsible for her death will face justice. Before 1850, doctors believed the miasma theory of disease. It's basically the idea that rotten and sickly things smell bad, so the bad smells must be causing disease. I can see why people thought that in older times, since it seems intuitive enough, but I guess no one ever tried the scientific method on miasma theory. Two people are recognized for bringing hand washing into the mainstream: Ignaz Semmelweis and Florence Nightingale. I'll be focusing on Dr. Semmelweis for today. He worked in a hospital and noticed that women giving birth were dying at a higher rate by those cared for by medical students than the midwives. He thought there was probably something about the students that was causing infections. He wouldn't find the solution until his friend Jacob Kolechka died after getting a cut from a scalpel that had been used on a cadaver. Quote, "Day and night I was haunted by the image of Kolechka's disease, and was forced to recognize, ever more decisively, that the disease from which Kolechka died was identical to that from which so many maternity patients died." Unquote. Upon realizing this, he ordered his students to wash their hands in a chlorine solution. He saw mortality rates from his division drop from 8% to 1%, and eventually 0%. In 1861, he published his work, The Etiology, Concept, and Prophylaxis of Childbed Fever, and it was rejected by pretty much the entire medical community. Basically, they took his findings to be saying that they were dirty people, and were having none of it. He was laughed at by all of them, even though he was obviously right to anyone paying attention. In 1865, Semmelweis suffered a nervous breakdown after being unable to handle the backlash and was institutionalized. In the asylum, he was beaten and thrown into a cell. He suffered a wound from the fight, which became infected and would kill him at age 47. Honestly, this whole case pisses me off in ways that not a lot does. This doctor was trying to save lives and ended up being beaten to death for it, figuratively and literally, because of some uppity doctors that couldn't stand being wrong. I do believe his critics have blood on their hands for not changing their ways when the evidence became clear. What reassures me is that countless lives have been saved due to hand washing, especially during a pandemic, and we have this man, Dr. Semmelweis, to be thankful for that. In the year 1917, New Jersey company, United States Radium Corporation, or USRC, began employing young women to paint glow-in-the-dark dials. The smaller hands of the women made them suited to the intricate dial painting work. They would later become known collectively as the Radium Girls. The exact number of them isn't known. This kind of work took place at 3 different factories and went on for decades. Demand for dials was always there, but especially high during both World Wars I and II. They were instructed to use their mouths to keep the paintbrush tips as fine as possible, to waste less paint, and to paint faster. The mantra taught to them was lip, dip, paint. Each time, the girls ingested a small amount of radium. What the girls didn't know was that the radium in the paint causing it to glow was deadly, without proper handling. The company knew the dangers of radium, since the company's founder, Sabin von Sochaki, had been the inventor of radium paint himself. He once accidentally got radium onto his left index finger, and with little hesitation chopped his own fingertip off. He wrote in 1921 that radium could be handled only by taking the greatest precautions. When ingested, the human body treats radium like calcium, where it finds its way into bone and stays in there permanently. The radioactive radium emits alpha, beta, and gamma rays that destroy the body from the inside and causes cancerous tumors as well. The actual amount of radium in the paint used was fairly small, and so there wasn't any obvious reactions at first. Slowly but surely, the girls started to develop strange symptoms. They would visit dentists for aches in their mouths and find their teeth loose, just falling out on their own. Parts of jawbone straight up breaking off clean wasn't uncommon. Radium sickness hadn't been invented yet, so dentists and doctors were all at a loss. Radium was the trendy new super element that was supposed to be good for you, so obviously that couldn't be it. Different diagnoses and treatments were given, including for syphilis and phossy jaw, but the girls never recovered. Some that only worked for short times lived, but when girls started showing symptoms, it was pretty much always too late. Girls would die off from cancer, anemia, bleeding, with no meaningful relief. To this day, there isn't a cure for radium poisoning. Attempts to get any kind of compensation or to stop USRC's workplace practices were frustratingly obstructed, and practically no lawyers were willing to take on their cases. While in court, USRC could deny liability due to the short 2-year statute of limitations for workplace accidents, or just claim that radium isn't to blame since the girls' symptoms did vary significantly. Lawyer Raymond H. Berry would be the most successful attorney against USRC for a time. The momentum didn't continue, however, as Berry, in 1929, in order to secure a later settlement for May Canfield, agreed to never be involved in a lawsuit against USRC ever again. There wouldn't be many legal victories for another 8 years, until 1937, all the while Radium Girls continued dying off. This year, Clarence Darrow was contacted, the lawyer from the monkey trial case about the teaching of evolution in schools, which he'd famously won. He was unable to help due to his failing health at age 80, but called on Leonard Grossman to take the case. He did so and turned out to be the perfect man for the job. He ended up representing 5 Radium Girls that called themselves the Suicide Club: Catherine Donahue, Mary Rose Sitter, Pearl Payne, and Francis and Marguerite Klasinski. They were suing Radium Dial, a new company unaffiliated with the United States Radium Corporation. He sympathized with the women and was committed to getting them justice. He'd work 18-hour workdays preparing his case, all for free. He was a brilliant orator, and to make his points, he leaned on the women's emotional testimony and their obvious failing health. Notably, after Catherine Donahue's testimony detailing her pain and the lies from Radium Dial, she pulled out fragments of her jawbone that had broken off on their own. Catherine later testified again from home in her own bed, since she was, a short time later, now physically unable to attend court. There she demonstrated for the last time for the court how she had put the paintbrush in her mouth as instructed by her employer to lip, dip, paint thousands of times over years that would ultimately kill her. The case was won, and with it, the maximum total compensation at the time of $95,000 with a $5,000 yearly pension for life. And finally, the company exposing the girls to radium were found to be at fault. All this happening after the first lawsuit against USRC by Marguerite Carlo 15 years earlier. But again, the fight wasn't over, because Radium Dial filed an appeal 2 weeks later, which they ended up losing. Then they appealed the appeal, and lost that. Radium Dial continued to appeal the case, all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, which declined to take it up, finally keeping the guilty verdict firmly in place. The Radium Girls influenced or directly caused so much change that it's hard to overstate. The court cases established a precedent of winning workplace injury lawsuits against employers. Safety regulations for radioactive materials were also established, which conveniently happened around the start of World War II. Manhattan Project officials researched the Radium Girls and visited the factories to learn acceptable radiation levels. A U.S. Atomic Energy Commission official wrote, quote, "If it hadn't been for those dial painters, the Manhattan Project's management could have reasonably rejected the extreme precautions that were urged on it, and thousands of workers might have been, and might still be, in great danger." Unquote. In 1963, U.S. President John F. Kennedy signed the International Limited Test Ban Treaty, prohibiting atomic tests above ground, underwater, and in outer space. So, It's very possible that without the struggle of the Radium Girls, we'd have nuclear wars from space. Don't think about that one for too long. Nuclear energy and weapons don't appear to be going away anytime soon. So, really, every person on Earth that will ever live has the Radium Girls to thank for their own safety. These cases are all sad, and even one preventable death is too many. I do believe that there is good that can come from these tragedies, and that they're worth talking about. If you're ever in a situation dealing with people's safety, directly or indirectly, remember these stories and do what you can to help out. You might be in a position where your good judgment can save someone's life. And even if you don't think that applies to you, because you don't work for OSHA or whoever, I don't think the massage therapists that came up with the idea for the Amber Alert would have thought so either. Or maybe you take care of people, especially children or the elderly, that can't always protect themselves. There's a lot we can do to teach the younger generations about the dangers from our time. We can straight up just tell them ourselves directly, or push for safety training wherever it's needed, like the Great Shakeout in schools for earthquake safety. I also believe we owe an obligation to prepare future generations as well that aren't alive yet and won't be until after we're gone about the dangers from our time. It can be done, though it does take some creativity. Write about them in stories, books, or songs. Or go find some big-ass rocks, carve some warnings in them, and put them all over the place like Easter Island. I don't know, but if you have a good idea that can help, I'm sure that future generations will appreciate your wisdom. This is Cyberpunk Ramblings. Take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you later.